Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Messallina. Valeria Messalina, sometimes spelled Messallina, was the third wife of the Roman Emperor Claudius. She was a paternal cousin of the Emperor Nero, a second cousin of the Emperor Caligula, and a great-grandniece of the Emperor Augustus. A powerful and influential woman, with a reputation for promiscuity, she allegedly conspired against her husband, and was executed on the discovery of the plot. Her notorious reputation arguably results from political bias, but works of art and literature have perpetuated it into modern times. Early life. Messallina was the daughter of Domitia Lepida the Younger, and her first cousin Marcus Valerius Messalina Barbatus. Her mother was the youngest child of the consul Lucius Domitius Barbus and Antonia Major. Her mother's brother Gnaeus Domitius Barbus had been the first husband of the future Empress Agrippina the Younger, and the biological father of the future Emperor Nero, making Nero Messallina's first cousin despite a 17-year age difference. Messallina's grandmothers Claudia Marcella and Antonia Major were half-sisters. Claudia Marcella, Messallina's paternal grandmother, was the daughter of Augustus's sister Octavia the Younger by her marriage to Gaius Claudius Marcellus Minor. Antonia Major, Messallina's maternal grandmother, was the elder daughter of Octavia by her marriage to Mark Antony and was Claudius's maternal aunt. There was therefore a large amount of inbreeding in the family. Little is known about Messallina's life prior to her marriage in 38 to Claudius. Her first cousin once removed, who was then about 48 years old. 2 children were born as a result of their union, a daughter Claudia Octavia, a future empress, stepsister and first wife to the Emperor Nero, and a son Britannicus. When the Emperor Caligula was murdered in 41, the Praetorian Guard proclaimed Claudius the new emperor and Messallina became empress. Reputation. With her accession to power, Messallina enters history with a reputation as ruthless, predatory, and sexually insatiable. Her husband is represented as easily led by her, and unconscious of her many adulteries. In 48 AD he went away on a trip and was informed, when he returned, that Messallina had gone so far as to marry her latest lover, Senator Gaius Silius. While many would have ordered her death, the emperor offered her another chance. Seeing that as weakness, one of his head officers went behind the emperor's back and ordered Messallina's death. Upon hearing the news, the emperor did not react and simply asked for another chalice of wine. The Roman Senate then ordered a damnatio memoriae so that Messallina's name would be removed from all public and private places, and all statues of her would be taken down. The historians who relay such stories, principally Tacitus and Suetonius, wrote some 70 years after the events in an environment hostile to the imperial line to which Messallina had belonged. Suetonius's history is largely scandal-mongering. Tacitus claims to be transmitting what was heard and written by my elders without naming sources other than the memoirs of Agrippina the Younger, who had arranged to displace Messallina's children in the imperial succession, and was therefore particularly interested in blackening her predecessor's name. It has been argued that what passes for history is largely a result of the political sanctions that followed her death. Accusations of sexual excess were a tried and tested smear tactic, and the result of politically motivated hostility. 2 accounts especially have added to her notoriety. One is the story of her all-night sex competition with a prostitute in Book X of Pliny the Elder's Natural History, according to which the competition lasted for 24 hours and Messallina won with a score of 25 partners. The poet Juvenal gives an equally well-known description in his 6th satire of how the empress used to work clandestinely all night in a brothel under the name of the She-Wolf. He also alludes to the story of how she compelled Gaius Silius to divorce his wife and marry her in his satire X. Messallina in the arts. To call a woman a Messallina indicates a devious and sexually voracious personality. The historical figure and her fate were often used in the arts to make a moral point, but there was often as well a prurient fascination with her sexually liberated behavior. In modern times that has led to exaggerated works which have been described as romps. The ambivalent attitude to Messallina can be seen in the late medieval French prose work in the J. Paul Getty Museum illustrated by the master of Boucicaut. Tiberius Messallina and Caligula approach one another in the midst of flames. It recounts a dialogue that takes place in hell between the three characters from the same imperial line. Messallina wins the debate by demonstrating that their sins were far worse than hers, and suggests that they repent of their own wickedness before approaching her as they had done. While Messallina's wicked behavior towards others is given full emphasis, and even exaggerated in early works, her sexual activities have been treated more sympathetically. In the 1524 illustrations of 16 sexual positions known as I modi, each was named after a couple from classical history, a myth which included Messallina in the booth of Lysiska. Although early editions were destroyed by religious censorship, Agostino Cariati's later copies have survived. Later painting and sculpture. One of the few avenues to drawing a moral lesson from the story of Messallina in painting was to picture her violent end. An early example was Francesco Solimeno's The Death of Messallina. In this scene of vigorous action, a Roman soldier pulls back his arm to stab the empress while fending off her mother. A white-clad witness observes calmly from the shadows in the background. Georges Rochegross's painting of 1916 is a reprise of the same scene. A mourning woman dressed in black leaves, with her face covered as a soldier drags back Messallina's head, watched by a courtier with the order for execution in his hand. An earlier French treatment by Victor Bienery makes the lesson plainer, by specifically identifying the scene of her death as the garden which she had obtained by having its former owner executed on a false charge. She crouches at the foot of a wall carved with the name of Lucullus and is denounced by a dark-clothed figure as a soldier advances on her, drawing his sword. Other artists show scenes of debauchery like the Italian Epigma in When Claudius is Away. Messallina will play hint that it will soon follow. What was to follow is depicted in Federico Ferrafini's The Orgies of Messallina. A more private liaison is treated in Joaquin Sorolla y Bastidas Messallina in the Arms of the Gladiator. This takes place in an interior, with the empress reclining bare-breasted against the knees of a naked gladiator. Juvenal's account of her nights spent in the brothel is commonly portrayed. Gustave Moreau paints her leading another man onto the bed while an exhausted prostitute sleeps in the background, while in Paul Rufio's painting of 1875 she reclines bare-breasted as a slave offers grapes. The Dane Peder Severin Croyer depicts her standing, her full body apparent under the thin material of her dress. The ranks of her customers are just visible behind the curtain against which she stands. Two drawings by Aubrey Beardsley were produced for a private printing of Juvenal's satires. The one titled Messallina and her companion shows her on the way to the brothel, while a rejected drawing is usually titled Messallina returning from the bath. Alternatively, artists drew on Pliny's account of her sex competition. The Brazilian Henrique Bernardelli shows her lying across the bed at the moment of exhaustion afterwards. So also does Eugene Cyril Brunet's dramatic marble sculpture dating from 1884. while the Czech Jan Sturza's standing statue of 1912 shows her holding a last piece of clothing at her side at the outset. Stage productions. One of the earliest stage productions to feature the fall of the Empress was the Tragedy of Messallina by Nathaniel Richards, where she is depicted as a monster and used as a foil to attack the Roman Catholic wife of the English King Charles I. She is treated as equally villainous in the Venetian Pietro Zagury's La Messallina. This was a 4-act prose tragedy with 4 songs described as an opera scenica that revolved around the affair with Gaius Silius that brought about her death. Carlo Pallavicino was to follow with a full-blown Venetian opera in 1679 that combined eroticism with morality. During the last quarter of the 19th century, the idea of the femme fatale came into prominence and encouraged many more works featuring Messallina. 1875 saw the German verse tragedy Aria und Messallina by Adolf Wilbrandt, in which Charlotte Walter starred as the Empress. That year, 2 Hans Makart painted her in the role. It was followed 2 years later in Italy by Pietro Cossi's tragedy, in which Messallina figures as a totally unrestrained woman in pursuit of love, and by Luigi Danise's ballet. In the USA, there was a 5-act tragedy by Algernon and Sidney Logan, who had liberal views on sex. Isidore de Lara's opera Messallina inspired Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec to a series of paintings, including Messallina seated and Messallina descending the staircase. In 1914 there was a 3-act German expressionist tragedy by Hermann Kaiser in Messallina. In 2009 the theme was updated by Benjamin Askew in his UK play In Bed with Messallina, which features her final hours. Novels. An early fiction concerning the Empress La Messallina by Francesco Ponna appeared in Venice in 1633. This managed to combine a high degree of eroticism with a demonstration of how private behavior has a profound effect on public affairs. Nevertheless, a passage such as, Messallina tossing in the turbulence of her thoughts did not sleep at night, and if she did sleep Morpheus slept at her side, prompting stirrings in her robing and disrobing 1,000 images that her sexual fantasies during the day had suggested helps explain how the novel was at once among the most popular and the most frequently banned books of the century despite its moral pretensions. Much the same point about the catastrophic effect of sexuality was made by Gregorio Leta's political pamphlet The Amours of Messallina, late Queen of Albion, in which are briefly couched secrets of the imposture of the Cambrian prince, the Gothic League, and other court intrigues of the 4 last years' reign not yet made public. This was yet another satire on a Stuart Queen Mary of Modena, in this case camouflaged behind the character of Messallina. In 19th century France, the story of Messallina is subject to literary transformation. It underlies Le Femme de Claude, the novel by Alexandre Dumas Fils, where the hero is Claude Routepert, an embodiment of the French patriotic conscience after the country's defeat in the Franco-Prussian War. In contrast, his wife Césarine is a creature totally corrupt at all levels, who sells her husband's work to the enemy and is eventually shot by him. Alfred Jarry's pataphysical novel Messallina of 1901, though lightly based on the historical account, is chiefly the product of the author's fanciful and extravagant imagination, and has been compared with the treatment of classical themes by Art Nouveau artists. A very early treatment in English of Messallina's liaison with Gaius Silius and her subsequent death appears in the fictionalized story included in the American author Edward Maturin's Sejanus and Other Roman Tales. But the part she plays in Robert Graves' novels I, Claudius and Claudius the God is better known. In it she is portrayed as a teenager, at the time of her marriage, but credited with all the actions mentioned in the ancient sources. An attempt to create a film based on them in 1937 failed, but they were adapted into a very successful TV series in 1976. More sensational fictional treatments occur in Vivian Crockett's Messallina, the wickedest woman in Rome, and Jack Oleg's Messallina, a novel of Imperial Rome. Oleg's novel went through many editions and was later joined by Kevin Matthews' The Pagan Empress. Both have since been included under the genre toga porn. More recently there has been the 2002 German novel by Siegfried Obermeier Messallina, Die Letzte Hoftkaiserin. Brought to you by WikiVidi.com. Would you like to know more?